We are joined by Drew Glover, who is a wonderful fundraising coach here and is an extremely skilled fundraising strategist who is dedicated to elevating nonprofit organizations through tailored fundraising, engagement, and donor stewardship strategies. He brings a wealth of experience in nonprofit operations, in team management, and community building. And he's a super sought after resource for organizations of all sizes aiming to maximize their impact. So I'm sure he'll add a little bit more, but if you've been to one of the sessions with Drew in the past, you know that you are in for a treat and you will walk away with some actionable tips here and learn a whole lot. So I will take my back seat now and Drew, let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and hello, everybody. Welcome to our session today. My name is Drew Glover. Thanks for that amazing introduction. I am one of the fundraising coaches with Bonterra, working with organizations all across the country of all different sizes to be able to support strategic planning, execution, and finding ways that we can maximize the results of your fundraising strategies while leveraging all of the amazing tools in the Bonterra network. A little bit about me. I've been in the fundraising and strategic planning world for well over 10 years. Really interesting every year that goes by. It's always a reminder of the changes and evolution that happens in the fundraising world, but also some of the main and consistent kind of foundational elements that can stay consistent no matter when you're working or what you're looking at. Raised millions of dollars for different organizations of all different sizes, from $10,000 a year startups to $10 million a year established organizations. So really understanding how all of those different entities and institutions operate, some of the different approaches that we can take. And then I operate around these three primary pillars of fundraising. If you think about it as a stool, you need them to make the foundation of everything. And when we find balance with those pillars in the appropriate harmony, then we can really see some movement in our fundraising strategies. And those three pillars, which I'll reference again later in the presentation, are data, visibility, and ultimately relationships, and how we're leveraging our relationships and working to build trust to make it so that people feel confident about giving to the organization and helping us achieve our mission. So we're talking about end of year giving. And sometimes, and I think many of you can join me in this, end of year giving sometimes raises more questions than it does answers. And one of the ultimate questions you need to ask yourself is, should you participate in Giving Tuesday? It's one of the big questions. Organizations have different thoughts around this, and maybe you've tried it in the past and it was amazing. Maybe there was some room for some growth. So what are you going to do this year, and how are you going to approach and participate in it, if at all? How do you plan with limited time and resources? So we're in the nonprofit world, and oftentimes we don't have all of the teams and all of the people to be able to run a super huge campaign. But what can we accomplish with the resources and time that we do have available to us? And how do we strategically structure our plan so that we're maximizing the results that come out of the time that we're investing in it, so that it's not taking us away from some of our other work or other fundraising strategies to be able to come up with kind of a drop in the bucket compared to what we need? And then ultimately, we're going to talk about and answer the question, or at least look at the question of, how do you stand out amid the surge in appeals, especially around the end of the year when everyone is vying for everyone else's attention? What's going to put you out in front of everybody else? So in this session, I've kind of tailored it. We don't have a ton of time together, but I'm going to try to hit on a lot of different topics to be able to illustrate some of the practices that you can adopt in your work, or even to maybe be opening up some thoughts that you may not already have had. And so the goal with the session is for you to learn and understand the benefits to starting early, setting clear goals, and building a timeline. We want you to be able to learn what you should segment, personalize, and how to make your emails more visually digestible. How to use Giving Tuesday strategically if you do decide to use it as a part of your year-end flow, leveraging your existing assets and mobilizing key stakeholders and what that looks like. And then ultimately how to plan a strong follow through at the end of the year, because we want to move away. And what oftentimes happens is we think about fundraising as transactional. I'm asking you for money, you're giving me money, I go do the work, that's it. I come back 6 months later and ask you for money. But how do we steward those relationships so that we're developing transformational interaction between us, the donor, and the organization? And so those are things we're going to talk about today. First, let's talk about standing out in the inbox. So getting inundated as individuals, we know that if we're in anyone's mailing list, we're going to get a lot of newsletters about Giving Tuesday and end of year fundraising stuff. So, what's important when you're doing this kind of work is to remember to be creative, personal, and memorable in your content. So, what does that look like? Well, we can be thinking about subject lines to begin with, because that's the first thing that people are going to see. It's going to make or break whether someone clicks on an email and then reads whatever else of the amazing content that you put in there. So, what will get their attention? Now, in the chat, because I'm going to try and do this to be as interactive as possible, so you're not just listening at me talk, which one of these 4 subject lines is the most engaging for you, that makes you want to engage with the most? Just put the number in the chat really quick. 1, 2, 3, or 4.
All right,
Seeing a lot of ones.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
ones.
a lot of ones. Yeah, I
Mostly
got a couple
ones. Yeah.
threes and
Couple threes.
fours.
Mhm.
Yep. Seems like we're on the same page. That 2 is probably not the most engaging subject line. The others have elements to them that grab your attention. So, like, what's a power hour, first of all, but then also, how am I going to have my gift double in response? Last chance, right? So that's going to create a time restriction on what I'm doing and potentially win something. Or $1,000,000. Who doesn't want to read about potentially $1,000,000 in their inbox, as opposed to donate today, which could be perceived as, no offense to anyone that does it, kind of boring. So how do we do that? And what does that look like in real life examples? So here are 2 examples of folks that leveraged those 2 of those subject lines to really drive engagement during their end of year giving campaign. First is Days for Girls. It's an organization that had a smaller goal, depending. I mean, I always say that, but goals are relative, right? If you have a annual budget of $40,000, $41,000 is a ton of money, right? But in context, they ran this campaign in partnership with another group that was doing a match campaign. So they were able to tell people that they were able to donate to the organization and double their contribution in partnership with this other entity that was doing this campaign. They were able to raise $41,000 and got $15,000 worth of a match in that process. So getting someone to click on something that then leads them into an opportunity to double their dollars, but then also is paired with something else, builds trust, because their dollars aren't going into a black hole. It's going through another established organization that's going to double their dollars, but then also they can feel their impact twice as much. A larger example is the Atlanta Habitat for Humanity, where they used the term, and this was another one of those engaging ones that you voted on, one of the most engaging ones, is join the power hour. Your $125 gift becomes $250. Now, here's another matching gift strategy, but instead of having it be a protracted or longer period of time, they've isolated that to 1 hour of matching gifts. This is a tool that you can use if you're running a longer campaign, but you want to get a last surge of energy in towards the end. So they could have been seeing a whole bunch of contributions, requests from you or solicitations, but not given for whatever reason. But when they see this and they know that it's their last chance, or that they can double their donation during this specific time period, then it helps to drive people to do that. You can see that they surpassed their goal by $17,000, raising almost $118,000 through driving this Power Hour campaign. So, just something to think about. That's a fun fact also. When there were surveys done, especially Double the Donation, which is a great resource for a lot of information around funder data, is that over 84% of survey participants were more likely to donate if there was a matching gift involved, and 1 in 3 said they would give a larger donation if there was a match. So I know that some people aren't used to doing match campaigns, but it's something that's really effective in driving people's awareness and engagement, because not only does it make them feel like they're excited and they're going to double their donation, but it also, let's say you're finding a donor that's willing to make the match, they're not only contributing, but they're helping to drive fundraising in the organization, which then increases their participation as a whole and their buy-in. So some examples of how we can use subject lines. We'll talk more about that in a little bit when we're talking about comparing subject lines and understanding which ones are more effective. But here's some quick how-to tips on things that you can implement kind of now and how you can use it in real life. Is using those match or time limited offers to catalyze urgency, or crafting a subject line that teases a big goal or direct impact. impact statements are key. So your $10 will feed X amount of people. And so those kinds of messages are much more effective than help us raise $10,000 because there's no statement of where that dollars are going and there's less of a personal connection. And then also figuring out calls to action or CTAs, which I may reference later in the presentation, that are bold, the mobile optimized, and visually scannable. We don't want to have subject lines that are 150 characters long that I have to read this really long statement. It should be short, succinct, and if at all possible, personalized using your CRM, like Bonterra offers, to be able to add their first names or any other kinds of identifiable information that makes it feel like you're writing to them directly instead of a general shotgun. Next, we want to talk about segmenting and personalizing because this is what's really going to help drive your engagement and people's understanding and interest in what you're doing. So we want to divide, personalize, and then test the message. And so this is what we're going to start talking about when I mentioned testing your subject lines. So segmenting your list. What does that mean? Well, we want to understand who's in your network. You have a list of donors, which is great, but who are they and what are they interested in? You could be looking at different ways that they donate. So are they new donors, people that have donated in the past but not anymore, or people that are recurring or giving every month? Or how are they engaging with the organization? Did they come to an event? Did they participate in some kind of a survey that you gave around ways that you can improve the organization? Have they expressed a specific interest in one of your programs that you can give them more information about? Once you understand that and who's in your network, then you can start to think about what messaging you want to put out to them. Because if I'm someone that's given every year $5,000 to your food program, you probably want to tell me about the food program because I'm really invested in that program as opposed to, say, your singing and dancing class, which I have never given to you at all. Now, you can mention it to me and say, hey, don't forget, we have this awesome singing and dancing class. But you definitely want to make sure that my messaging has to do with the areas of focus that I'm expressed that I want to know more about with the organization. And ultimately, for every email you send out, you want to have specific goals. So what is the goal of this email that you're sending out? Is it a call to action? Is it to encourage donations? Is it for social media engagement, volunteer support? We really want to make it so that it's focused and targeted. And we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is relatable so that we're not always making calls to action to folks. So asking them to do things, but what are we doing for them? And what are we doing that illustrates the impact of their action they took when they were accomplishing that call to action? So how are you leveraging your emails to accomplish a goal? And then we want to talk about personalizing the message. So you know what they're into, but then if you're talking to them, it's much better to have a message that sounds like it's crafted for them as opposed to a general message that you put out into the world. Now, you can do this in a variety of ways using some of the systems that Bonterra offers because there are things called merge fields or merge tags that allow you to write a general skeleton email but use those merge tags to fill in identifiable elements of the individual that you're talking to. So if I have a data record in your donor database, and you know that my name is Drew, I donated $5,000 last year, I've expressed a deep interest in your foods program and something else, right? You can go through with the merge fields and write a general email, but have it so it auto-populates each one of those segments so that when I read it, it's like, wow, they pay attention to what I know. And then that builds that relationship. Again, remember, relationships are the end all be all. It's one of the three pillars, but I've been in situations where you can have a tremendous relationship pillar with kind of a limited visibility pillar and still see massive results because you have the people that are in relationship with you doing the outreach for you, as opposed to you having to spend a lot of time and energy in pushing out messaging, but no one having a relationship with you and not even caring because I could send out all the messages in the world, but if you don't care about what I'm saying or you don't like me, then those are going to go into your spam box. But if I'm someone that you built a relationship with and you're always looking for updates from what I've been doing because you know that I'm paying attention to you as an individual and you're seeing the impact, I'm much more likely to engage with it. And so now we talk about A/B testing, and I'm going to talk about it in greater detail in a second, so don't worry. But what is A/B testing and how do we do it? It's basically experimenting. And so I mentioned it with the subject lines. A/B testing is a great way for you to use subject lines to determine which ones are the most relevant and which ones resonate with your population. Are they calls to action that people are clicking on more? Or is it opportunities to donate and solicitations? Is it thank you messages? Or is it educational notifications about things that are happening or data points? So, what is it that people are most interested in clicking on? And then also making emails scannable. What we want to avoid is like a novel as an email because no one's going to read it. Especially in the world that we live in today, people have very short attention spans and want to be able to understand content and get it right away. So, how are you structuring your email? Do you have a short welcome message that's maybe 2 or 3 sentences long that introduces what is going to be happening or thanking them for being a part of it? Then you have a couple blog posts with little snippets of all of the great things that you're talking about. Do you have a donation button somewhere on the thing? Where are your calls to action? How fast can I read that email? And so be thinking about those kinds of elements when you're putting it together also. Now, what is A/B testing? Let's talk about it in some more detail. I mentioned it before, controlled experiments. And so what we're doing is creating control points within the experiment that we know don't change. And then we can create variables in our messaging to understand how that coordinates. So versions A and B, since A and B testing. And the way that that works is basically in these 6 steps. So we want to first develop a hypothesis, which is understanding and getting an idea of I think this is going to happen, or maybe this will happen if we do this. And so getting a clear understanding of what that looks like. Then creating 2 versions of whatever the content is. So whether that is a subject line, whether that's a newsletter, you can do this with social media across the board. You can figure out what those 2 versions are. And then you want to split your audience, not by theme, not by segmentation, randomly. You want to split the audience, and then that gives you controls of people that are intermingled with each other that don't have any similar or specific connection to each other. And then you want to put the message out to those different groups. A is going to go to one group, B is going to go to another group. You're going to look at those results and then analyze them to understand which ones are responding better with which demographics. Then you take that number and that information, you work it into your communication strategy, and you implement whichever one came back with the highest results. This is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process. So maybe every 4 months, you want to do an A/B test on some of your things so you can understand the way people are reacting and responding to your messaging. Now, we want to make the content meaningful, right? Because we made it personal, we made it so that it's readable and engageable, but now we want to figure out how we can make it even more meaningful. And to do this, we want to really do and focus around storytelling, because storytelling is going to be one of your strongest tools in fundraising because it personalizes the work and it makes it so that people understand what you're doing and why you do it. So sharing stories about outcome-led narratives, what happened with someone. So for example, you could start with a success story about something that happened with someone that went through your organization that was struggling. You provided them the service. They came out the other end stronger, better, faster, strong, whatever it might be. And then encourage other folks to help in creating the next story. This creates an idea of I can do that too, and gets people to participate potentially in another campaign that will help to support other people. Now, another way you can do that is by how you can focus on future support. And by doing that, you can talk about a story in progress. So someone's in your organization, they're currently going through this. Here's some of the impact that you're seeing. Help us to complete this story and make it so that we can have this person come out the other end faster, stronger, better because of your support. This gets people excited about supporting the program and a project that's already underway. So you don't have to wait till something's done. And it shows that you're actively in process of doing the work. So 2 ways that you can leverage success stories. And if you're like, well, how am I supposed to get those success stories? That's a whole nother conversation about how we can make an organizational cultural shift within your organization. Because if right now you're the only one doing anything around fundraising, that's a problem because it's a team effort. So your program officers could be collecting the stories and giving them to your writers who are writing the stories, who are giving them to you, who's pushing them out to the donors. So what kind of systems do you have in place for managing your storytelling? Now let's talk about planning for end of year giving. We have the ideas now about messaging and how to create and content, but where does that fit into our end of year giving plan? And why should you start planning for it now when that's like 2.5 months down the line? Well, it's important to be prepared early for 2 primary reasons. One, it takes the pressure off and opens up space for creativity because I know I think much better when I don't have to be like, I need to come up with a solution for tomorrow. If I can think 3 weeks in advance and say, what am I going to do? It gives me a chance to reflect, think, plan, and execute. And also, it creates that breathing room for the testing that we talked about, figuring out which messaging works best, having other peers review it, and then also ultimately leads to better execution. And another fun fact just around end of year giving, and why, if you're not already focused on it, but if you're on this webinar, you probably are, is that 30% of annual gifts come in December, and 10 of those are in the last 3 days. So for your communications, do you end at Christmas? Or are you driving all the way through December 31st to remind people about their opportunity to give? So here are some tools that would make it probably a good idea to set up if you haven't already. These are all available through the Bonterra platforms, so highly recommend if you haven't already gotten it to make it happen. Otherwise, figuring out ways to make it happen on your own. So that's setting up an online giving page. So where are people going to be donating? Don't wait till the last day to set that up because you want to make sure that the content is relevant, that it's well written, that it has great imagery, that you might have some videos. What are you putting out there on the giving page that are going to make people to give, and how easy is that to access? QR codes? I don't know. Peer-to-peer fundraising, for those of you who don't know what that is, people take a portion of your fundraising goal, create their own fundraising pages, and then go and leverage their own networks. The benefit to that, relationships, relationships, relationships. Giving through texts, so text to give tools, which is also available, and figuring out how best to leverage your texting because people with different demographics communicate through different channels. And then also templates, email automation workflows, and segmented lists so that when people make donations by the hundreds and they all are coming into your organization, you're not getting buried underneath needing to respond to each one of them individually. Having automated emails that go out that give you the space to then follow up with them intentionally afterwards in a more personal way. Some other things to be thinking about while we're getting ready for the end of the year are those matching gift pledges that I mentioned before. Who in your network or in your world would be willing to give you a matching gift, even if it's $1,000, right? $1,000 matching gift, that equals $2,000 of other people contributing that other $1,000. So what does that look like? How are you going to make it happen? And then what are the ways that you're going to roll that out? Stock and cryptocurrency giving options, thinking about that for people that are looking to give that way. And then also creating alternative or backup plans in case something goes wrong or breaks down. What is the way to make that happen? Amanda and I are working with that today with our technology. And so figuring out what can you do if something doesn't work out the way that you're planning for it to. To create a solid plan, though, and this is something I talk about with all my clients, we need to understand where you've been and where you are currently, because you can't make a plan unless you have things to compare it against. This is the time as you're preparing for the end of the year to start to look back at last year's campaigns and understanding what happened, what you did, what worked, what didn't work, how much you got through the work, who was the ones that contributed, what was successful. And then that'll give you an idea of what you want to do for this year. Because man, if you look back last year, we did this Giving Tuesday push. We spent 70 person hours, 70 staff hours on this. We did a huge campaign through communications, but we didn't get any donations, or we got like $20. What is that? That's not even worth it. Well, where do your three pillars line up? Because you had a high level of communication, but were you sharing your data in that communication, or was it a bunch of like trivia questions that had nothing to do really with your organization? What were the relationships associated with those communications? Were you the one just sending them out, shouting them into dead space? Or did you have other people sharing them in your network and encouraging other people with their own language to contribute? So we need to look at total dollars raised, the total numbers of people that donated, people that stayed on afterwards and continue to donate, what the average gift size was, and then start to think about what do we want to do for this year. This is all strategy. And with strategy, this is one of my favorite things, is creating clear, measurable goals, because they will be your best friend, both if you're working alone, so you can challenge yourself and also track what you're doing, but also if you're working in a team, because they help to keep each other accountable and provide spaces for you to check in to readjust if something isn't working. So SMART is also a great word, but an acronym, if you didn't already know, and it stands for these 5 things. So when you're making a goal, you want it to be specific. So not, I want to increase the amount of dollars that we have coming in general. That doesn't work because yes, you can track that, but it doesn't give you much to weigh it against. So specific would I want to increase our number of donors that gave last year from 20 last year to 40 this year, right? Measurable. So that right there is measurable, right? I can look at it and say, hey, how much did we get? Attainable. If I'm pulling in $10 a month and I have a limited communications channel with no donor relations, I'm not going to set my goal for 1,000 recurring donors, right? Because that's probably not super attainable. But if I start at 10 and I say I want to get to 20 in 2 months, and then I can increase that upwards, I create attainable goals because there's nothing worse than not reaching your goal because it's really demoralizing. And you're like, man, I didn't hit that. What a bummer. Relevant. So if I'm trying to raise money for a program, I'm probably not increasing the number of pencils that we have in the office drawer, right? And so how relevant is it? And then time bound. So I'm always a big fan of from X to Y by Z. So I want to increase the number of donors from 20 to 40 by December 31st, because that gives you the ability to track that on a calendar and see where you are on touch points in between to track your input. When you're making these goals, don't just think about it for emails, think about it for everything, both in your donations, but also in your communications channels. So what does that look like for your SMART goals for your email, social, and peer-to-peer campaigns? And in that, as we're talking about the SMART goals, you need to have a timeline. Rock solid timelines in fundraising are a little difficult because things change, just like in life in general, things will change. And so you want to make something that's able to move and shift with what you're doing, but not so loose that you don't have accountability on what you want to do. So here are some key markers working backwards from December 31st that could be ways that you structure your timeline. So late October, you're finalizing your messaging framework and maybe any of the other elements that I talked about, like your donor giving pages and the other things that you need. Early November, which you could also be doing in late October, segmenting your lists, designing the templates, getting them ready. Mid-November, you're launching the first messaging around Giving Tuesday, maybe a week out, maybe 2 weeks out. Hey, this month is Giving Tuesday. On Giving Tuesday, everyone's mobilized, right? You got your entire organization pushing out messages. That one post you put out there has been shared 100 times because everyone in your organization has shared it. December comes, you're ramping up with the impact stories and the urgency of people to give at the end of the year, all the way up to December 31st. And then at the end of the year, you do your final ask and then begin into your thank you sequence or your donor stewardship, which comes through that. But what does that look like realistically? Well, here is what it looks like realistically. You can be thinking about it from Thanksgiving or even before. Like I might recommend you starting this process because you notice my other timeline started in October. This is just to give you an idea of the snippet between January or Thanksgiving and the end of the year, where we have November 28th, just a general thank you or gratitude that you send out to people after Thanksgiving to express your appreciation for them. Then also a soft launch with the inner circle of folks saying, hey, we're getting ready to do our Giving Tuesday. Wanted to let you know, here's what we're doing and how we're making it happen. Then Giving Tuesday comes, you send out the email with a match. Then December 9th, you launch your end of year campaign after you give some thank yous for your Giving Tuesday. December 13th, you email with donors or a client story to create that cadence and connection. You update them about what's going on and how things are going. Then you do a countdown to push the urgency on December 27th, the last day of appeals. Maybe you do your power hour or your New Year's Eve double day, whatever it might be. And then you do your stewardship at an early January. Now, a question I would ask you, saw it on the slide there, is are there ways that you think you could make that timeline stronger? Because like I said, that's a sample. There are so many different ways that you can go with it. So what does it look like for your organization to make the end of year giving calendar solid? And now let's talk about the engagement and the kind of the flow of communications, because a lot of times people just want to ask for money. Give me some money. I need some money, which works if you have a really compelling cause, But if you don't have those relationships or people don't know anything about what you're doing, it kind of can fall flat. We want to avoid that. So what I would recommend is this kind of flow chart. Now, you don't need to start in any one specific area, but I always recommend starting with visibility or the awareness side of things, where we want to let people know what you're doing. This takes the form of announcements about impact data. It's videos about people talking about the work. It's success stories so that people can see all of the different things that you're doing. With that, we want to shift over to the data or the engagement side of things, where so when I talk about data, I'm talking about your impact data, but also about collecting data from other people and your donors. So we're finding ways to engage them in actions, to bring them into the organization so that we can learn more about them, and really finding ways to understand who they are and what they care about. This is also another great time for you to be sharing about the work that you're doing through data and illustrating the impact of the dollars that people donate through the successes. Then we focus on the relationship. So this is you understand who they are, they know what you're doing. And so now you're really going to be working on developing more of a personal relationship with folks. This can be done through social media, very kind of impersonally, through responding and engaging messaging, but a lot of great opportunities, especially for your larger donors. This is the time when you really want to spend time getting to know them more personally. So this is like one-on-one meetings, phone calls, personalized emails that go out to them, asking them or for their thoughts about things, and then really thank yous. And this is the time when you can be appreciating people before we move into the asking, because by then you've built trust, you have a rapport with folks, they're aware of you, and then now when you come around and say, hey, can you donate $10 to the organization because we want to continue doing the work I've just spent the last month and a half telling you about, it's much more likely they're going to give to you, significantly much more likely. So thinking about this flow, what does this look like in your work? Are you actively engaging folks in communications that don't always ask for something? What are the ways that you're expressing your gratitude towards them? How are you getting them to engage with the organization in a way that gives you more information about them? And ultimately, what kind of asks are you asking for? Remember to stay mission driven, story driven, and urgent in those language when you're doing the solicitation. So what happens at the end, though? So we talked about the messaging. Well, we've talked about how to understand your network and your list. We've talked about strategically planning and thinking about timelines, content, and the ways that you're going to ask. But what do you do when it's over? Well, a great question I want to ask you is who does what when? So when a donation comes into the organization, who does what when? And you'd be surprised when I ask this question to a lot of organizations, they don't really know, because sometimes or oftentimes there's one person that's responsible for everything, which if we're thinking about donor stewardship, it doesn't always work, because as awesome as a person as I am, if I'm the development director for an organization and you make a $10,000 gift and I'm the one calling you, well, that's great. But I'm sure you'd much rather hear from the executive director or the chairperson of the board because of their leadership role in the organization and because they're less accessible to be able to access. So we want people to, there's a sense of exclusivity with that. I get to talk to the executive director. I'm getting a phone call from the executive director as opposed to a staff members calling me. But the responses are going to be different based on the level of contribution. So a $5 donation is going to be reacted to differently than a $10,000 donation. And do you have a interval of what each one of those donation gifts are and who's doing what? If not, there's a pro tip here. You could Google donor stewardship matrix template, and you'll find some great examples that you can take to your team. But let's talk about just the general end of year flow. Immediately after the contributions, we want to send an acknowledgement. So that can be 24, 48 hours of best practices, but sometime within the first week, you want to make sure that you're getting back to those folks and saying, yes, thank you so much for what's going on. At the end of January, you also want to send a look at what's ahead. You could do as mid-January also, like this is what we have planned for the year. This is what we got to what we're going to be able to accomplish because of the contributions from what happened over the winter season and people giving. And then also you can also do check-ins to understand kind of additional ways for people to be able to get involved. And this would be kind of January, February, if we're thinking about kind of the seasons. is when you would check in for additional ways for them to stay involved by inviting them to events, finding out how you can have lunch with them, and some of these different kinds of ways to increase engagement and relationship. And now here's some snazzy strategies for end of year giving. We really want to focus on engaging smarter and not harder, because we already have workloads that we're balancing. So how are we maximizing the impact of the things that we're doing and making sure that we're doing it in ways that are fantastic, right? Or snazzy. So some things to consider when you're doing end of year, but I do want to emphasize that it's not a one size fits all thing. So some of these may work for your organization. Some of them might not seem realistic at this moment. Maybe you've done some of these things before, but if right now doesn't seem like the right time, that's okay. Put it in your back pocket. As fundraisers, we have toolkits, and when we're ready, we can pull that out and move things forward. So thinking about soft launch tactics. So this is a great way with any campaign, but also with Giving Tuesday, to have your goal set, have all your materials ready, and then going and talking to a closed circle of individuals that you think will support it ahead of time. Because the cool part is that when you do this, you'll get pledges and contributions before you launch publicly. It's much more exciting to put out a fundraising campaign and have there be immediate donations than having it put out and sit at zero for a week, because that's not going to be exciting for folks. But if you can launch it, and then within the first 30 minutes or an hour of that page going up, you're getting $50, $100, $300 donations coming in from people that had already pledged that were waiting for it, then you can take that energy and push it out into your social media channels and your newsletters and say, we've already raised $5,000 towards our $10,000 goal, and it's only the first day. So get on, don't sleep on this, donate now, help us reach our goal, and so on and so forth. Creates social proof is the term, right? It shows that you're not just a bunch of talk. There are people behind you that actually support what you're doing. Match and limited term strategy. We talked about this in the beginning, using those matches and power hours, which are proven ways to drive conversation and conversions when paired with smart designing and times. So how are you leveraging those? And then also repurposing your stuff. I see people with these amazing blog posts that are full of great information, and they live on their blog and no one reads them. So how are you taking that information and turning it into short, digestible videos, social media snippets, statistics that are then turned into infographics? And then how are you pushing those things out that are driving people back to read that full blog, which are then increasing your website statistics and getting them to look at some of the other things that you're doing as a whole with the organization? So just some ideas. And then also thinking about the recurring gifts as a major focus. Now, I haven't talked much about the types of donations that you should be going for during this, because this is all around planning and strategy. But recurring contributions are definitely the most valuable for you to focus on if you can, because of the return they provide and because of the relationship that they build. So if you have 10 recurring givers in your organization, maybe set your end of year goal, not for a dollar amount, but for a recurring giving amount, to be able to say, we want to increase our givers by 20 people this year. So become one of our recurring givers. And in this example that was used by She Jumps, they added a prize to it. Now, you have to check your state legal. So I'm not a lawyer. Just want to emphasize that, not giving any legal advice. I would definitely check your state laws about nonprofits holding raffles, or what are considered raffles or drawings or whatever it is, because it goes state by state. But if you can, this is a great way that this organization leveraged a item to drive donations and recurring giving. And so they were able to get their hands on a Yeti cooler. This is a great way for you to partner with other businesses also, because you can ask them to donate whatever it is and then use that as your tool that you're using to drive this. But getting people to become a recurring donor to hit your goal, the benefit to them, they get to not only become a change maker in your organization and build that relationship, but also they have the chance to win a Yeti cooler. Right? Who doesn't want to do that for $5-10 a month to be able to win a Yeti cooler and do something good? So a good statistic to keep in mind is that recurring donors are 9 times more valuable over time than a regular donor, because they're giving you money guaranteed every month. And there's the opportunity for you to steward that and increase that donation, as opposed to having to go back to someone every time and ask them to contribute, which is more staff time and energy. And then some tactics you can use right now. So if you leave this meeting, you can make it happen. Think about leveraging your peer-to-peer campaigns for the end of the year. It connects people with their existing networks and grows things organically. Mobilizing your board and volunteers to get them to participate, provide testimonies, and really drive the message, because everyone should be doing it in the organization. Clean up your data and segment everything so that it's ready to go. That's something you can do today, is looking at your stuff and figuring out what people like and dislike, or even doing a donor survey, and then figuring out how you can leverage the double your impact framing and get a head start on getting those matching pledges early. Ultimately, the goal is to transform donors into change makers in your organization and have them see themselves as change makers. They're people, so don't forget that. We're talking about money and donations, but they're people with thoughts, feelings, and issues of their own. And so what are the ways that you're engaging them to make them feel like they're a deeper part of what you're doing and connected to your organization? And then thinking about where you're engaging with them. Are you engaging with them? Or are you just doing social media stuff? Where are your interpersonal face-to-face contacts? How are you following up after campaigns? And how are you curating stories of how their contributions are driving the mission of the organization? I think that brings us to the end of the presentation. Look at that. And we have time for some Q&A. Back to you, Amanda.
Beautiful. Thank you so, so much, Drew. As I'll call it, Warren told elated folks in the beginning that this would be jam-packed with information, and you surely delivered on that. And I really appreciate all of the things that you shared. Let's jump into questions. Before we do, I did see just a couple folks just asking about, like, how do I segment? Where do I do that? How do I run these kinds of things? I know Drew mentioned kind of throughout the presentation that Bonterra has tools that help you execute a lot of these different things. So I'm going to launch a quick poll. If you're interested, I'll leave that up for a moment while we take on the next question, which there was a bit of a discussion in the chat happening, Drew. So I'd love to get your input on
I
if
saw that.
you should send out a Giving Tuesday appeal and an end of year campaign appeal. Is it one campaign? Is it separate? Is it bombarding people? So I'd love if you could just kind of like give your take on the Giving Tuesday versus year end overflow, and what you would recommend.
Yeah, so there is a conversation or a debate, I guess, in the fundraiser world of, is donor fatigue a thing? Some fundraisers you talk to say no, not at all. Others say yes, it is. And as individuals, I think we can all attest to, if we're getting too much of something, we may unsubscribe from it if we're not connected to it. So this gets back to our conversation of relationships. Because if I'm really into what you're doing and I really care about what you're doing, I want all the emails. Like, give me them. Like, tell me what's going on. But they shouldn't all be fundraising emails, right? And that's the key with that arc of communication, is that my Giving Tuesday emails should be interwoven with inspirational success stories, quotes and testimonies, impact metrics about what I'm doing. The other idea or approach is to link your Giving Tuesday with your end of year giving campaign. So this year we're raising $5,000. Help us reach $1,000 this Giving Tuesday. And it kind of acts like one of those time limited, which is why I think Giving Tuesday, was really successful originally, was it created this finite period of giving that required people to take action right then. So you can be thinking about how you want to use that mental construct in your end of year giving of, do you want to incorporate that? Or, and I've been sharing this with folks, I think it's genius. One of the organizations I work with doesn't even do Giving Tuesday. They don't do it because they feel like it's too much work and it's too much staff time for them to be able to do it. What they've chosen to do is flip it on its head. And I love this, is they do Gratitude Tuesday, where instead of asking people for dollars on that day, they turn around and do an intentional day of appreciation. So imagine the difference that has on your psyche. You're inundated by emails all day long about people asking you to contribute. And then you receive a phone call from your organization saying, hey, you know what? We just wanted to say thank you. We really appreciate what you're doing. Your contributions have made a huge impact. And I know today there's a lot of people asking, we're just here to say thank you for everything you do. If you ever want to hang out, just let me know. But my name is Drew. Just want to let you know, right? So way different energy. And then if you come back at the end of the year and ask for dollars, then what's the difference going to be? And so this is something that you can test this year if you wanted to or not, is how do you use Giving Tuesday unconventionally? right? Because we're talking about standing out. And so that could stand out significantly, as opposed to the grind that we see around Giving Tuesday in general. But it also and comes down to your population, because again, not one size fits all for these things. I would say test it, ramp it up a little bit, see if you get any unsubscribe notices, and then because you're always like, it's natural for unsubscriptions to happen, right? Anything over 1% is a little alarming if you're doing that. And so thinking about what that looks like. But remember, you're consistently bringing in new people to your newsletter. So some people are going to drop off after a while. And if they don't want to hear from you around all your great work that you're doing, well, then they could be on your newsletter all day long. But if not paying attention to what you're saying or are annoyed by you communicating with them, probably not the best.
Yeah, that was a really clear picture. And I like that idea a lot of like that gratitude, kind of that like that breath of fresh air a little bit, especially in that, in all of the noise and sometimes chaos, right? That is our inboxes. So
Yes.
I get that. Technical term, schnazzy.
Snazzy.
I'm gonna start using that as my new favorite fundraising term. But you were talking a lot about testing here, right? And so I want to bring us back because earlier in the presentation, we had a couple of questions about A/B testing specifically that you were discussing. The first one that came in from Roger was, is there, what is the smallest valuable sample size for an A/B test? Kind of saying like our donor base is pretty small. Is it effective if we run one? If it's like too small, is there kind of a right or wrong way to do that?
I mean, you can look at statistic recommendations from different researchers around A/B testing, but I would say, anything more than 20 people is probably a good sample size. So if you have a newsletter pool of 20 people and you send 10 to one person and 10 to another group, and that may be a little bit less random in the sense that you would want to make sure if you have that small of a population that you'd have an array of identities in each one of them so that you can have that diversity in the ways that they're responding to things. But yeah, I'd say even if it's small, it gives you an idea of what your network is responding to.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in a similar vein, for those who are looking to implement these kinds of A/B tests for their either small, larger groups, do you have a recommendation or know of one for like how far in advance you should be conducting it, and then like when to decide on what works and what doesn't?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like quarterly evaluations if you have the capacity to do that. And so figuring out when in your fiscal year, when in your year you're wanting to make that happen. The as for this, since we're talking about end of year, right? I'd say do that now through September, and then analyze and maybe do one or two more tests with what you come back with your analysis in October, and then use that for your November, December timeline. So say at least 2 months out so that you can start to get an idea of what's going on. And as you're doing it more and more and it becomes more of a regular institutionalized thing, then you're going to start to build up a lot of data, especially if you're doing it every quarter, around which ones do better. A great example that I've given other webinars is farm I work with. They saw an 89% decrease in their social media traffic, and I asked them what they do differently. They said nothing. We went back and looked at their content. The month before, they had done a lot of human story based content where it was look at our interns, look at what's happening, look at the impact. And the next month, they did a lot of static stock image. Did you know? What do you think? And so look, clear as day, looking at what people want as far as that kind of stuff. Now, we could take, now that we know that people are way more interested in the human side of things and the impact of things, what elements of that? Is it the kids? Is it the adults? Is it color schemes that we're using? Is it videos versus pictures? And then finding out what, so it's just an ongoing process.
Yeah, that's a great call out, right? And that, the drop might not be happening for reasons you expect, right? And actually taking that secondary look and seeing, what's resonating and really understanding the impact of that. Thanks for that, Drew. I've got a time for probably, I'm going to go with like 2, maybe 3 more questions. So if you haven't dropped it in, speak now or forever hold your peace. But
I'll try and keep my answers brief.
speaking, oh no, this is great. The thorough answers are appreciated. And speaking of trying something new, right? And for folks who are looking to implement new things, Kathy had mentioned that they currently don't segment their donors. And so they're wondering if you would suggest doing that for the first time at year end, or does that feel like don't change too much at year end? What are your thoughts there?
Well, even if you segment your list, you're still able to send general messages out. So I would say get started as soon as you can to understand who's there and what they're doing. Things that I also suggest sometimes, if you have the capacity to, is to do like maybe twice yearly or annual donor surveys, where you're sending a survey out to your donors and saying, hey, we want to know more about you. And that gives them the opportunity to reply back with things that you can then segment them for. Like, what are you most interested in our organization? Excuse me. Why did you first give? What's your favorite color? What's your birthday? What's the best contact information for you? What's the best channel of communication for you? Because if I'm more into text and I never read my emails, then you're going to send me text messages instead of emails. And so understanding what that looks like. And while you're doing that, you can still be sending out general newsletters to folks. So it's never too early to start segmenting your lists, and figuring out how you want to segment them. Again, remember, it's about personality traits and personal engagement, but also about donor level and interests. So
Awesome. Thanks for those tips. Um, all right, coming through to the next question I saw come in, and Drew, you talked a lot about like using the things that you do have, right, to in other ways, in other fashions, and then at the same time linking your campaigns. So I think this question from Sean really is tied in there, which is, have you seen any nonprofits that integrate hard copy appeal themes cleverly with their email appeals?
integrate hard copy appeal themes cleverly, with their email appeals. I don't understand the question in the sense, like, I don't know if they mean like, how do they incorporate physical mail in connection with their email campaigns? Is that the
Yeah,
question?
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, mail is expensive to do. So you have to ask yourself, looking at your returns from the previous year, is my physical mailing worth it? If it is, then you have to look at who those folks are and what level they're giving at, and then be like, okay, because usually physical mail and stuff has traditionally been more popular with people of like an older generations, because they're reading mail more frequently than they are checking their emails and all that kind of stuff. So who are the demographics that are replying to you? What is their kind of level of interest? And then really the letter writing campaigns are oftentimes ways to fish for new donors. Depends on what you're doing too. Like, if you have a set list of donors that you send the same list out to all the time, that's different than if you have a prospect list that you're sending things out to for contributions to people you don't already know. Because with that strategy, you want to see who's coming in with the larger gifts, and then using your email and other communication strategies to steward that individual to larger gifts, because you know they're able to. So is there a way that everybody does it? Not really. It really depends organization by organization. I think it's about capacity, it's about finances, and it's about the target audience. Because if I like my email campaign and end of year strategy is going to be different to a group of donors that are recurring donors that know me versus a group of people that have never heard about me before. And so how are you doing that with your structure? I know that didn't provide the end all be all answer to it, but
no, I think that that's a great answer though, because a lot of times we're like, well, how can I do it? Be more clever, be more noticeable, be more this, that, or the other thing. And there is that layer of like, sometimes you do have to take a step back to say like, do I need to make it better, or is it worth it in the end, right? Or those kinds of questions. But thank you for answering that, and hitting on that alignment piece. I know throughout the presentation, just making sure that it's one succinct campaign. All right, taking a breather. I haven't seen any additional questions come in, so I will take that second of silence to see if anyone has any last minute questions.
there's one I see from the Cultural Arts Coalition that says, at what amount does one become a
Ah,
donor? I just want to address that really quick. $1. right? Any person that is making a contribution to the organization, you could consider a donor. What matters is the level of donor, because if I'm giving you $1 a month, that's great, but that's $12 a year. Probably don't want to invest the majority of your time in stewarding me unless I'm just a really maniacal millionaire that just donates $1 to get kicks out of it. But if I'm someone that's donating $100 a month, that's someone that you want to potentially invest, because you have limited time. You want to start to invest more time in those higher level donors. And then your organization will determine what's a major gift. And then that person will have a different engagement strategy. But even people that donate in kind contributions, like if I come and donate $20 worth of muffins, that's a donation. And you can think about volunteers as donors also, because last I checked, it's about $34 an hour is the value of a volunteer hour. So you could be saying, and also volunteers are the most likely to convert into donors, like financial donors. And so be thinking about how you want to start to categorize people in your organization and how they interact with you so that you can leverage that and find ways to turn them into larger gifts.
Thank you for catching that. Sorry to the Cultural Arts Center for missing your question. Thank goodness for Drew. I see one. Looks like one more question just came in. Oh, Nadia asked if they are able to connect with you, Drew. I don't know if you have LinkedIn or want folks to
Yeah, so
connect
you can
with you
find me
there.
on LinkedIn. Drew Scott Glover is my LinkedIn. You can also book me as your Bonterra fundraising coach if you enjoyed this and want to spend more time with me. I'm sure that Amanda will send out a link, or there will be some option for you to be able to sign up for fundraising coaching. Just follow those links, find me in my profile, set up our first meeting, and we can hit the ground running with whatever you want some support with.
I threw up another poll in case anyone does want to learn more about the coaching
And let me
aspect
see, I
of
can
what
drop
we do.
my email in the chat, but if there's anyone else that wants to get in touch with me, you can do it that way. Let's go here and then come back to the Zoom and drop it in the chat. Drew's email, exclamation point. Oops. Drew, if I can spell my name correctly. There we go. I'm just too excited. I'm too excited to give you my email. There you go.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Drew. Thank you for sharing. And I hope you see the thank yous that started to roll in through the chat. Folks saying that this was super helpful, exceptional presentation, great advice. I take it that by folks saying they want to learn more about how they can work with you, you've done a good job. So I really appreciate all of the expertise and guidance and clear, succinct structure of today's session that you gave. And always a pleasure to work with you. And I want to thank the audience for joining. I know this is a crazy time of year and it's about to get crazier. So taking an hour out of your day to spend with us means a lot. So we really, really appreciate it, folks. There we go. I'll drop the email in again, just in case, because I saw some folks say they couldn't see it.
Yeah, I wonder why they can't see it, but
There we
it's
go.
coming.
There it is. All right. The email's in the chat now. I'll give folks a bonus second to snag it, even though we're a little bit over time.
Wonderful.
All right. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, everyone. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. Take care, folks.
Bye, everyone.